For years, we've treated the brain like a CEO isolated in a corner office on the top floor, making all the decisions about mood, cravings, and mental clarity by itself. But what if I told you that more than 90% of your body's serotonin, the feel good neurotransmitter we associate with happiness and emotional stability, isn't made in your brain at all? It's manufactured in your gut, and the workers on that production line are not human cells, they're bacteria. Welcome to Longevity Lab. I'm Claire.
And I'm Robert. Claire, you just said 90% of serotonin comes from the gut, not the brain. I've spent my entire adult life assuming my mood was all up here in my head. Are you telling me I should have been talking to my stomach this whole time?
In a sense, yes. But before anyone gets the wrong idea, I want to be clear. Serotonin made in your gut doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier and enter your brain directly. The serotonin your brain uses is manufactured locally. But the serotonin produced in your gut acts on the enteric nervous system, a vast network of about 500 million neurons lining your gastrointestinal tract from your esophagus to your colon. The system is so sophisticated, so autonomous, that neuroscientists genuinely call it the second brain. And here's the key connection. Your gut's nervous system is in constant bidirectional communication with your brain through a superhighway called the vagus nerve. So when we talk about gut bacteria influencing mood, it's not magic. It's a hardwired anatomical communication network that researchers can now map.
Okay, so it's a literal physical connection, not just some vague you are what you eat metaphor. That already changes how I think about my digestive system. But help me understand if I'm feeling anxious or I can't focus or I'm just in a low mood for no obvious reason. How do gut bacteria actually trigger that? What's the mechanism?
Let me walk you through three primary pathways that research has identified. The first is neurotransmitter production. Different bacterial strains produce or influence the production of specific neuroactive compounds. Certain lactobacillus and bifidobacterium species, for example, can produce gamma-aminobutyric acid, or GABA, the same calming neurotransmitter that anti-anxiety medications like benzodiazepines target. Other bacteria influence your body's production of serotonin and dopamine. So when we say your mood is partly microbial, we mean it literally. The chemical messengers that shape how you feel are being synthesized or modulated by the ecosystem living in your colon.
That is genuinely astonishing. My gut bacteria are essentially running a small pharmaceutical factory, and I didn't even realize I had employees.
You have about 100 trillion employees, actually. And the second mechanism is the immune pathway. About 70% of your immune system resides in your gut in what's called gut-associated lymphoid tissue. When the gut lining is healthy and the microbiome is diverse and balanced, this immune tissue helps regulate systemic inflammation. But when the microbiome becomes disrupted, a state researchers call dysbiosis, the gut lining can become more permeable. That's what the wellness industry often calls leaky gut, though the accurate scientific term is increased intestinal permeability. When that happens, bacterial components called lipopolysaccharides can enter the bloodstream and trigger low-grade systemic inflammation. And we now have robust evidence linking chronic low-grade inflammation to depression, anxiety, and cognitive decline. A 2019 meta-analysis published in Molecular Psychiatry looked at over 25 studies and found that people with depression had significantly lower levels of certain anti-inflammatory bacterial species and higher levels of pro-inflammatory species compared to healthy controls.
So it's not that the bacteria are sending a sad signal. They're creating inflammation. And that inflammation is what's affecting my brain.
Exactly. And clinical research has been building on this exact hypothesis. A groundbreaking study from 2022 published in Nature Aging followed over 1,000 older adults and found that those with a more diverse gut microbiome showed significantly less cognitive decline over a 5-year period, What's especially compelling is that the researchers could actually predict cognitive trajectories based on microbial composition at the start of the study.
They could predict it? That's the kind of finding that makes me sit up and pay attention. And what was the third mechanism you mentioned?
The third is short chain fatty acids, or SCFAs. When you eat dietary fiber, and I mean the real fiber from vegetables, legumes, whole grains, the fiber itself is indigestible by human enzymes. It passes through your stomach and small intestine largely intact and arrives in your colon where specific bacterial species ferment it. The main products of that fermentation are short chain fatty acids, primarily acetate propionate and butyrate. These are among the most important molecules for human health, and most people have never heard of them.
I know fiber is good for me. I've known that my whole life. But I've never had anyone explain to me why, in a way that actually stuck.
Let me make it stick for you. Butyrate is the primary energy source for your colonocytes, the cells that line your colon. Without adequate butyrate, those cells literally starve, and the gut barrier weakens. Butyrate also crosses into your bloodstream and enters your brain, where it has been shown to promote the expression of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF. Think of BDNF as fertilizer for your neurons. It supports the growth of new neurons and strengthens existing connections. Low BDNF levels are consistently associated with depression and cognitive decline. So when you eat a bowl of lentils or steamed broccoli, you are not just getting vitamins, you are literally feeding bacteria that produce the compounds that fertilize your brain. That is the gut-brain axis in action. That is why what you eat today affects how you think and feel tomorrow.
I am looking at my lunch completely differently now. And honestly, I feel a little embarrassed admitting this, but I've spent years thinking probiotics in a pill were probably doing most of this work for me. I take a supplement every morning and assume that was my gut health sorted. I'm sensing you're about to tell me I've been doing this wrong.
I'm not here to judge. Probiotic supplements have their place in specific clinical contexts, and of course, if you have a medical condition, that's absolutely a conversation to have with your doctor. But let's look at what the evidence actually says about the probiotic supplements most people are taking. A 2018 study published in Cell, one of the most prestigious scientific journals, examined what happens when people take a standard multi-strain probiotic after antibiotics. The researchers took biopsies and samples from the participants' guts, and they found something striking. In many individuals, the probiotic bacteria simply passed through without colonizing the gut at all. They were transient visitors, not permanent residents. And perhaps more surprisingly, the probiotic supplementation actually delayed the recovery of the person's native microbiome compared to doing nothing at all or receiving a fecal transplant of their own pre-antibiotic microbes.
Wait, the supplement delayed recovery? So I could be taking something that's actually slowing my gut's natural ability to bounce back?
In that specific study, yes. That does not mean all probiotics are useless for all purposes, and there are specific strains with good evidence for specific conditions. Certain Lactobacillus rhamnosus strains for antibiotic-associated diarrhea, for example. But the wellness industry has sold us this idea that you can just swallow a capsule of bacteria and fundamentally rebuild your gut ecosystem. And the research simply does not support that for the average healthy person. So here's the most counterintuitive truth I want to share today. Most people focus on adding bacteria through supplements, but the real power to reshape your microbiome actually lies in what you feed the bacteria already living inside you.
Feed them, not replace them. That shifts the whole mental model. So what does feeding them actually look like on a plate?
Let's get practical. The single most evidence-based dietary pattern for gut health is what some researchers now call the Psychobiotic diet, a term coined by researchers at University College Cork in Ireland who have been pioneers in this field. The term combines psycho for mind and biotic for life, and it specifically refers to dietary interventions that support a microbiome profile associated with better mental health. The core principles are incredibly straightforward. Number 1, diversity. You want to eat at least 30 different plant foods per week. That might sound like a lot, but it includes vegetables, fruits, legumes, whole grains, nuts, seeds, herbs, and spices. A 2018 study from the American Gut Project, published in Min Systems, analyzed stool samples from over 10,000 participants and found that people who ate more than 30 different plant types per week had significantly more diverse gut microbiomes than those eating 10 or fewer, even when both groups were consuming the same total amount of plant matter. It's not just about quantity, it's about variety. Every different plant feeds different bacterial species.
30 different plants per week. I'm mentally counting right now, and I think I eat maybe 12 on a good week. Broccoli, carrots, apples, bananas, rice, potatoes. It's the same rotation over and over. I have never once thought about my gut bacteria getting bored, but now I'm picturing them just waiting for a parsnip to show up someday.
That's a wonderful image. And here is an actionable way to hit that target without overhauling your entire life overnight. Start with what I call the grocery store challenge. Each week, buy one vegetable, one fruit, one legume, one whole grain, and one herb or spice that you didn't buy last week. Just 5 new items rotated into your existing routine. Sunchokes one week, black beans the next, millet the week after that. Over a month, you've introduced 20 new plants. Your bacteria genuinely respond to this novelty.
I can actually do that. That feels approachable. What else is on the psychobiotic plate?
Number 2, fiber. I am going to give you a target that most nutrition research converges on. Aim for about 30 to 35 grams of dietary fiber per day. Most adults in Western countries get about 15 grams. They are literally starving half their gut bacteria, and I need to give a practical warning here. If you are currently eating a low-fiber diet, do not jump from 15 grams to 35 grams overnight. You will be incredibly uncomfortable. Increase gradually by about 5 grams per week to give your gut time to adapt. Gas and bloating are normal during this transition and typically resolve within a few weeks as the bacterial populations rebalance.
I appreciate that warning because I was absolutely about to go home and eat an entire bag of lentils. And I know from experience that would not end well for me or anyone near me.
Gradual is the key. Number 3, polyphenols. These are compounds found in deeply colored plant foods, berries, dark chocolate, green tea, coffee, extra virgin olive oil, pomegranates, purple sweet potatoes. Polyphenols are not well absorbed in the small intestine, so they travel to the colon where specific bacteria metabolize them into bioactive compounds that have anti-inflammatory and neuroprotective effects. A 2021 randomized controlled trial published in Nature Communications found that a diet high in polyphenol-rich foods significantly increased beneficial bifidobacteria and reduced markers of inflammation in just 8 weeks. And number 4, fermented foods. I'm not talking about probiotic pills, I'm talking about traditional fermented foods like plain yogurt, kefir, kimchi, sauerkraut, miso, and kombucha. A landmark study from Stanford University published in Cell in 2021 randomly assigned participants to either a high-fiber diet or a high-fermented food diet. The fermented food group showed a remarkable increase in microbial diversity and a significant reduction in 19 different inflammatory markers, including interleukin-6, which is strongly implicated in chronic disease and aging. And here's the fascinating part. The more fermented foods they ate, the stronger the effect. There was a clear dose-response relationship.
So, real food fermentation, not a pill. And there's a dose response, meaning the benefit scales with how much you consume. I love that clarity. And I'm thinking about the inflammatory markers you mentioned. Is that the connection to aging and longevity?
It's one of the central connections. Chronic low-grade inflammation, often called inflammaging in the scientific literature, is now recognized as a hallmark of the aging process. It underlies everything from cardiovascular disease to neurodegeneration to metabolic dysfunction. Your gut microbiome is one of the master regulators of systemic inflammation, and everything we've discussed, fiber, polyphenols, fermented foods, plant diversity, these aren't wellness trends. They are the dietary inputs that shape the microbial ecosystem, which in turn shapes your inflammatory profile. One more finding that I think will resonate with you: a fascinating study emerged from the Blue Zones research, those 5 regions around the world where people live exceptionally long, healthy lives. Researchers analyzed the gut microbiomes of centenarians and semi-supercentenarians in Sardinia in Japan. What they consistently found was an extraordinary abundance of Bifidobacterium and Akkermansia unifila. These bacterial species are associated with reduced inflammation, improved gut barrier function, and better metabolic health. And what's striking is that these centenarians weren't taking probiotic supplements. They were eating traditional diets rich in fiber, polyphenols, and fermented foods. Exactly the pattern we are describing here. Their longevity wasn't about a single superfood, it was about an entire dietary pattern that continuously fed a diverse, resilient gut ecosystem.
So the Sardinian shepherds and the Okinawan grandmothers, they weren't reading microbiome studies. They just ate real food their entire lives. And it turns out that real food was building this incredible internal garden. The science is validating what traditional diets always did.
That's beautifully put, and I want to give listeners one more practical framework to take home. Think of your microbiome like a garden. The bacteria are your plants. Prebiotic fibers are the fertilizer. Polyphenols are the protective mulch. Fermented foods are like adding new seedlings to diversify your garden. But what happens if you keep pouring weed killer on the soil? That's where we need to talk about what damages the microbiome. Ultra-processed foods, chronic stress, inadequate sleep, unnecessary antibiotic use, and a monotonous diet, all of these act like herbicides on your internal garden. And the research is increasingly clear that you cannot supplement your way out of a poor dietary pattern. The foundation must be whole food.
That garden metaphor is going to stick with me. Every meal, I'm now going to think, am I fertilizing or am I spraying weed killer? So let me bring this to the practical reality of my life. I'm in my mid-60s. I want to keep my brain sharp. I don't want to be another statistic in the cognitive decline column. Based on everything you shared today, if I could only make one change starting tomorrow, what single thing would give me the biggest return?
One change: eat 30 different plant foods this week. Count them, write them down. If you hit 30, try for 35 next week. That single shift, increasing plant diversity, addresses the fiber, the polyphenols, and the varied substrates your different bacterial species need. It is the single dietary lever that pulls on multiple gut health mechanisms simultaneously. And remember, this isn't about perfection, it's about pattern. If you eat a diverse, fiber-rich diet, most of the time your microbiome remains resilient even when you occasionally have a meal that isn't ideal. The goal is not rigidity. The goal is resilience.
30 plants. I'm going to count them starting today. And what I'm taking away from this conversation, and I want to say this because I think it's what makes Longevity Lab different, is that you didn't try to sell me anything. You didn't tell me to buy a $200 probiotic regimen or some exotic powder from a rainforest. You told me to eat vegetables, but you explained the why in a way that makes me genuinely want to do it. That is empowering.
That's exactly the goal. Knowledge that drives real change, not fear. And of course, before anyone makes significant dietary changes, especially if you have a gastrointestinal condition or on medication, please have that conversation with your doctor. What we are sharing here is science education, not individual medical advice. Your healthcare provider knows your specific health context.
And if you found this episode valuable, if it changes how you think about that apple or that bowl of lentils you're going to eat today, please subscribe to Longevity Lab and hit the bell. We release a new evidence-based health episode every single day. No hype, no fear, just the science. Claire, what's our rule for today? The one memorable takeaway.
Here's your rule for today. Your gut is not just a digestion tube, it's a second brain, an immune command center, and a pharmaceutical factory all in one. Feed it 30 different plants this week, and you are not just nourishing yourself, you are nourishing the ecosystem that shapes your mood, your immunity, and how you age. Small change, profound science.
Love it. I'm counting my plants. See you tomorrow on Longevity Lab.
See you tomorrow.